a lot going on, not only in questions that I have about the Urban Meyer investigation, and I want to get legal expertise from our man, Tony White, former Buckeye basketball captain, and also attorney, but also some changes to college basketball rules, and you wonder if it's going to trickle down to all college sports, the NCAA making some significant changes. So I wanted to get Tony's take. Before I get to that, Tony, one of the big question that I've been getting from people in regards to the Urban Meyer investigation. Now, Courtney Smith, when she did her interview a week ago, said on there that in 2015, no one from Ohio State ever contacted me, interviewed me, wanted to ask me what happened, got my side of the story. Her attorney yesterday put out a statement that they want to fully cooperate with Ohio State, but to this point, Ohio State has not spoken with her. I've seen a lot of people say, especially in terms of 2015, that, hey, Ohio State couldn't talk to her because, police are doing their investigation that would be looked at as witness tampering. As a lawyer, is that true? Did Ohio State have a responsibility that, hey, we got to stay out of this and let the police handle it, or could they, had they chosen to, talk to Courtney Smith?
Ohio State had no obligation to stay out of that. I mean, they going in and asking questions, gathering information for a legitimate purpose, which would have been a legitimate purpose if they had asked those questions of her at that time, regarding one of their employees, would be completely appropriate. They're not in there trying to prevent her from filing charges or get her to change her testimony. Those are arguably some, witness tampering or obstruction of justice, stuff like that. But, just going in and finding out what happened for an independent reason that you need that information to make determinations with your employees, there's nothing wrong with that.
A lot of people have, Urban Meyer's name came up in that. And Stan and I were saying, and I don't know, Dave, if you feel that was in October of 2015. I mean, they had just won the year before the national title. They're undefeated. He's going through a quarterback thing. He's in the middle of a season when this is all going down. I wouldn't expect him to call her, but the university certainly could have. I mean, I don't know whose responsibility it falls on, Tony, but your point is somebody at the school, whether it's Urban Meyer or Gene Smith or whomever, could have done that.
Yeah, the police investigation is not an excuse for not calling them. Now, whether they should have or shouldn't have, well, that's really not a legal question. That's more like a judgment call. But they cannot use the police investigation as camouflage to say, well, we couldn't call because of this investigation.
Yeah. So those are probably questions I would think the committee's asking them. Why didn't you contact her? How did that work? What was the reason that you didn't? So all of those things.
And again, all of this goes back to, from an Ohio State perspective, they're trying to figure out whether someone with a contract, whoever that might be, with a contract with supervisory responsibilities over this coach, knew something that they didn't know, and either failed to look into it or failed to report it. And that their contract requires them to either report or look into, or university rules require them to look into. That's what all this is about. And, but the idea that, they didn't have to look into it because there's a police investigation, that doesn't fly.
One last thing I want to ask you before I get to the basketball stuff. Okay, a week ago when I talked to you, we didn't know, and I presume that Urban Meyer's statement is true, and actually we've had Zach Smith corroborate that he did contact people. Coach Meyer did. A week ago, though, when I talked to you, we didn't know that. He had denied any knowledge of that. And at the time, you mentioned that Zach Smith's guilt or innocence in this really wasn't really relevant. It's the fact that if he had the information that this might have happened and he didn't pass it along, whether it's credible or not, that was his responsibility. Now it feels like, since we know he did report it, when you're decision makers now, does Zach Smith, the credibility of this, does Zach Smith's guilt or innocent, is it a factor in deciding what they're deciding right now for Urban Meyer?
I don't think things have changed on that front. I think that his guilt or innocence is really not relevant to the question of what Urban Meyer did or did not do. and whether what he did or did not do was consistent with his contract and university rules. I mean, it just doesn't really affect that analysis. I will say this, and I'll give you a lawyer's take on the Urban Meyer statement. That was put out publicly for the world to see. There is no way that a good lawyer, and I'm sure Urban Meyer has a very good lawyer because he can afford it. There is no way that a lawyer would let Urban Meyer put that statement out unless it was 110% true. That they had looked through every fact in that statement, they had proof of every fact in that statement, and in their mind there was absolutely no question about the truth of every fact in that statement. So for Buckeye fans, if you accept that as true, that they're doing their job and that statement is 110% true, then you should feel a little bit better, probably feel a lot better about where this is going to end up with respect to Urban Meyer, because that statement was pretty strong in terms of establishing that the guy didn't do anything wrong, and maybe it's time for him to go back and play and coach some football.
Visiting with Tony White, our basketball analyst here on 105.7 The Zone, but also a lawyer. All right, done with the Urban Meyer questions. The big story in college sports today is the NCAA making some significant college basketball rule changes. The FBI's investigation into the sport's crooked recruiting practices kind of has led them to this. Let me tell you the two biggest changes. One, elite prospects will now be allowed to have representation by agents. It applies to high schoolers and college athletes alike. This is the part, Tony, that is bizarre to me. USA Basketball, who had no idea, by the way, we now know that the NCAA was doing this, but USA Basketball will be tasked to identify which prospects are given the elite status, and all agents must be certified by the NCAA. The second part, all players who declare for the NBA draft but go undrafted can have the option to return to their former school. As a basketball fan, somebody that's followed the sport, what do you think about these changes?
Well, I don't mind the last one. Hey, if you don't get drafted, you can come back and go back to school. That seems fine to me. But the whole elite prospect, you can get an agent. Why does the NCAA continue to try and find ways to slice the bologna just a little bit thinner? I mean, instead of just doing something that makes sense, they're always trying to go for that complicated. Remember the old, Larry Bird, Michael Jordan commercials where off the side of the blimp,
yes,
off the nothing
horse.
but net.
Yes.
The NCAA is always trying for one of those crazy trick shots instead of just laying it in and getting it done. Who's an elite prospect?
Right.
Why does an elite prospect get the benefit of this? So just because you're better than me, you get the opportunity to do what you want to do? By the way, just because you're better than me now doesn't mean that you're going to be better than me as a pro. There are a lot of pros out there who weren't great in college but became great in the pros. So why do you get the benefit of that and not me? And then some USA Basketball thing is going to decide, who's elite. Well, who are they? Why do they get to decide
and
that?
If you were going to have USA Basketball, they have a camp, and I guess that's where it's going to come. If you were going to use that, wouldn't you run it by them first? But I'm reading from Adrian Wojnarowski that they're blindsided by this. What? We're determining for you guys who's elite? That's just unbelievable to me.
It doesn't make sense. First of all, the whole elite evaluation thing doesn't make sense. Somebody's got to do it. But then having some third party, and I know what USA Basketball is, but why do they have great insight into this? Why are they now the sole arbiters of who gets this great extra benefit, coming out of high school and go into college? It just doesn't make any sense. Instead of trying to slice the bologna so thin that you can see it's paper thin that you can see through it, how about you just say, everybody has access to this. Knock yourself out, people.
And that's what I was going to say, because I know I don't think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Tony, you necessarily like the idea of moving forward with an agent representing kids. But if you're going to do it, and correct me if I'm wrong on that, but if you're going to do it, do it. don't like put one foot in the water and go all in. I don't like the halfway thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for young men who have a chance to play in the NBA that they get good advice from people who should know what the heck they're doing. And I have no problem with having a list of agents for whom are they entitled to represent these types of kids, because I would want that list of I want those agents to be very, very trustworthy, not some fly by night guy. All right, so regulate the agents as to who can do this, but make it available to everybody. If you're going to give these kids the opportunity to get more information and make an informed decision about their future, why just some? Why not all? It doesn't make any sense. It's like the NCAA. They can't help themselves. They have to figure out how to do it the wrong way. The NCAA is very talented at wrong, and here we are again getting right what they always get right, and that is wrong.
It's like, all right, we're going to take care of some kids, but the rest of you kids, you're on your own.
Yeah, screw you. Screw you. Have a better year. You didn't have a good enough year, so you don't get the opportunity to decide what your future is, but the guy next to you does.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, Tony, I appreciate your insight as always. That was great stuff. Appreciate it very much. All right.
Thanks, Matt. And Dave, stop talking so much.
Well, why do I talk when you got it nailed, buddy?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't need me.
You just crowd me out. But by the way, I will say this, that your silence is 10 times better than sometimes some of the things that Stan says. So I will give you that.
Very good. Tony, appreciate it very much. Enjoy your day.
All right, guys.